Hello, friends, followers, teachers, colleagues, and well wishers. Welcome to Want to Know Politely, Episode 10. Good evening from here, from Bangladesh, and good morning, a very good morning to our guest teacher, Dr. Amrita Ghosh, in Florida, USA. Uh, Dear friends, as you know, as part of a regular program, every fortnight we come and we talk to a new teacher to share about her experiences, teaching experiences, particularly about teaching about English language and literature. And in part of that, our regular practices, we have with us, we have amongst us Dr. Amrita Ghosh, about whom we notified from my page, from my Facebook page, from the page of Want to Know Politely or Shabinoy Jante Chai, also from X, from my profile page X, and also from LinkedIn. So I am very much pleased, happy, and grateful to have Dr. Amrita Ghosh amongst us today, this evening from Bangladesh. And I welcome to Dr. Amrita Ghosh. And before going to talk to Amrita Ghosh, I like to have a few words about her professional career. Dr. Amrita Ghosh is Assistant Professor of English specializing in post-colonial studies and South Asian literature at University of Central Florida. She is the author of Kashmir's Necropolis, literary, cultural, and visual texts, which was published in 2023. She is also the co-author of Tagore and Yeats, a post-colonial revisioning. It was published in 2022. And she has co-edited Refiguring Global Challenges, literary and cinematic explorations of war, inequality, and migration. It was also published by Brill in 2023. Uh, Dear friends and followers, I am very much pleased to share that Ghosh's research interests are in the field of post-colonial and decolonial studies, South Asia, borderlands, conflict zones, and gender studies. She is currently working on a co-written book on India's cultural industries with FDO Press. So, Dr. Ghosh, thank you so much for being with us this evening in Bangladesh. Uh, 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 and just I want to hear a few words about Want to Know Politely and about this episode 10. Just a few words for me.
Thank you so very much, Nadim. You can please call me Amrita or Amrita Di, whatever you feel like. I'm
Okay.
I'm delighted to be here, and just quickly mentioning a slight change. I was the co-editor of Tagore and Yeats, A Postcolonial Re-Envisioning. It was not a co-written book; it was an anthology,
I
and
see.
I had co-edited it with a colleague, Elizabeth Redwine, and we have our own essays in the book, but there's a vast collection of fantastic essays from various parts of the world in that book. But besides that, I wanted to focus on this particular platform that you have created. And I was very curious if you wanted to start with some introduction in how you thought about this space, why you did so. And I'm fascinated because you're doing some very incredibly important work through this platform that you've created. So please, if you can introduce the platform.
Yeah, thank you so much, Didi. Actually, while teaching, I have got the experience of teaching for 16 years at tertiary level. So while working with my students very closely, I felt some issues that many of my students don't have the ideas about their course objectives, and even they are not familiar with I mean, how and in what way they are going to do, what way they are going to study literature and many of aspects of language. And one thing that hits upon my mind is that my students of my college, they are familiar with the lectures and the processes of lectures of our colleagues and me as well, but they are not familiar with teachers or resource persons all around the world. So they don't have the opportunity to listen to them, listen to expert people like you and other teachers across the world, that how they are thinking, how they teach, how what sorts of resources they have got in their actually in their area of knowledge or something like that. But my effort is to make my students familiar with become familiar with all I mean the resource persons that I can reach or I can connect to. So that is the idea, and through this they can be shared better ideas, better knowledge, and advanced ideas in what way literary understanding and literary advancement is going on. They can be familiar with that, and that's why I want to I want them to be familiar with other lecturers, other educators, how they feel, how they think, and how they teach. In that sense, I have actually started this Want to Know Politely, and already nine episodes have been held, and they have talked to they have listened to already nine educators, and they shared their views about many different ideas, and they have been benefited. They have been, I mean, widely experienced listening to or watching those episodes. So, and today, I think they will come to know about your teaching experiences, your ideas, and they will definitely be benefited from your discussion. So that is the point that I want to share with you here.
Congratulations on this terrific venture. I think um, this is an incredible opportunity for all of us to come together in this space. So it's not just one way. I think it's a terrific opportunity for me to come to know you, your students, and hello to all of them from here.
Yes. And actually, Didi, in this platform, what I normally do, actually, I ask questions. Some selected questions are asked to the educators. And you know that students have got so many questions, and often they don't get the opportunity to ask questions to their educators, or maybe that through YouTube they can be familiar with so many, educators, but directly they don't have the opportunity to talk to them. So this platform paves the way for them to ask questions. So there is also the questioning session. So if they ask question here, put the question here, then I will also put forward the question to you, the question that they, arise in their mind.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Didi. So the first question today I am going to ask you is that uh, your mother tongue is Bengali, if I am not wrong.
Um, we can discuss that, what the mother tongue means to me.
Okay, okay, whatever. So you are a teacher at University of Central Florida. So we know that USA, which is the highest echelon of knowledge and learning and education. So everybody around the world has got the dream that they would go to America for higher studies or something like that. So you are a teacher of at a university of such a country. So while you are teaching English literature in particular, so how do you feel? So you see that you have got mostly the students whose mother tongue is not Bengali, not maybe that their mother tongue, their mother tongue particularly, I should rather say that English. So how do you feel? Whether you feel any problems or something like that while teaching them? share?
Thank you, Nadim. I think that's a terrific, interesting question for me because when you said that, your mother tongue is Bangla, and of course it is. My parents, I grew up speaking Bangla with my parents, but it is also true. I think this would be true for many of us watching, that in the Indian subcontinent, um, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and many other places around, we grow up multilingually, right? So I think,
Yes, yes.
in my experiences, specifically for me, I grew up with Bangla, with English. I went to a very sort of English medium instruction schooling system. I grew up with Hindi and or Hindi Urdu floating around me. So
And that is because of your, I mean, Indian culture, Indian particular, I mean, Indian situation. But in Bangladesh, the situation is not like that, because here most students are monolingual. Their learning is monolingual. English is the foreign language or something like that. But you have got the extra opportunity. Uh,
true, but I'm also thinking those who are, and this is also definitely a very uh, hierarchical class situation. You're right, and but we are privileged in the subcontinent in a way where a lot of different kinds of languages float around. So in my case, and you're right, maybe this is specific to India, but I would like to think it is in pockets spread out in various spaces. So almost, when I rethink what my mother tongue is, it's a mixture of various things. And Indian English is also something very specific. I think we've claimed the language as ours, right?
yes, yes,
So
yes, definitely.
I think it's a kind of a intermixture of various languages that I would like to think as my mother tongue. I now speak Swedish also, and so it's an interesting kind of thought process that I have in my head, where suddenly different kinds of words would come to me from different languages. But that said, your question is very interesting because you're asking about, um, within American academia, how I feel about teaching in English. And I hadn't thought of it in this particular way, but I have students from various linguistic backgrounds also, but dominantly it is English. And I never really had a problem, in a way, teaching or with having students from different backdrops communicating in English. Of course, it is when papers are written where, it becomes, how do we deal with a certain kind of language being written for research papers, for grading. And I think those are the spaces where, my training in a particular kind of British English undergoes certain transformations. And I learned how students write mainly. And, I've been teaching for the last 15 years or so. So I think at that space is where a certain kind of, I wouldn't say problem, but interesting negotiations about learning about how students write, about how my writing has changed. Eventually I would write in a lot of complex sentences, and I have learned to chop them up into more crisper, shorter sentences. So those are the kinds of negotiations and shifts that take place in learning and teaching.
See. Okay, one thing, it may be the complementary question that if I talk about us, again, I mean, relating to that, that our mother tongue is Bengali or Bangla, and that's why we face a lot of problems while studying English literature and language. So, in terms of, I mean, rewarding marks in the exams, and we suffered from this, that whether we will correct our sentences or we will focus on literary ideas or literary conceptions or something like that. So that was a challenge. That
Mm.
uh, our first problem is that being the, I mean, English is the foreign language. That's why we don't have that great mastery for that. So we suffer from this. That how to correct the language first, and then focusing or thinking about literary conception or something like that. So that is the challenge that we face mostly, being the students who don't have English as the first language or something like that. So in that sense, and the sort of marks that we are awarded in the exams. That is mostly some 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people. They actually achieve standard, quality, good marks. But most of the other ones, as they lack the adequate, expertise of the language, that's why they are not awarded very good marks in the exams. So in terms of, I mean, those students who has got English as their mother tongue, so what sort of things you see that whether all the time they write accurately, they write standard English or quality writing or something like that. So my question is that how do you evaluate or assess their mistakes, or how do you suggest to them correcting their problems in terms of achieving good marks or standard marks?
This is the tough one. And I'm going to try and break it down. So, grading is one of the hardest things as a teacher. I think you would agree with me here,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, definitely,
But
definitely.
but your question is very interesting because there are a couple of layers in it. One is about the form and the content, about how to deal with concepts, but how to also deal with the language and the form that it is written in. And then you're also talking about whether English speaking students whose mother tongue is English, do they have any kind of language oriented problems? Absolutely. So when I just am getting out of a semester here in the States, and and throughout my career, whether it's been in Florida or it's been before, I have taught in Sweden, I've taught in New Jersey prior to my prior to this job. And I don't think it's a mother tongue issue per se. When it is, or as I said, a research paper, or that final paper in the semester that is being graded for marks or grades. Here in the States, we have grade systems, A, B, C, and so on. It's the same kind of challenge, right? So there would be grammar-oriented problems, there would be run-on sentences, there would be problems in using citations and research. So what ideally I do is have a discussion about do's and don'ts. And this is something kind of different. And I was thinking about your question because when I was studying myself, I studied in Delhi University. You're expected, if you're opting or you have been placed in majoring in English or English honors, as we call it in the subcontinent. I think it's the same in
Yes,
Bangladesh,
yes,
honors in
yeah,
English,
obviously,
right?
yes,
So
obviously.
we're expected to write well. There is no other sort of training in writing a research paper, in writing as such, at least not in my days. And maybe things have shifted from then on. But when I came into American academia, I was absolutely amazed that there was this specific course or couple of courses in training how to write well, right? So, but even now, when I teach in the major program in the English major, all the courses that I teach are upper level courses, and the same kinds of problems are there. How to deal with a thesis, how to write a good thesis, how to write, incorporate research, and then sentence level errors. So it's not a mother tongue. I would like to specify this for all the students watching and all the teachers watching, that it is not necessarily a mother tongue problem. We can, how we speak in many of our tongues may be very different in how we write, and our writing still needs training and negotiation and constant practice and revision and drafting, painstakingly so.
Thank you so very much, Didi. I think we have got the point that you emphasize that mother tongue doesn't matter here in terms of good writing. Actually, training does matter. So whoever the person is, whatever the mother tongue is,
Yes.
if someone wants to focus on some good writing or something like that, he or she must have a very good training, good process, and if he or she goes to that, then he or she can ensure good writing. Wonderful, wonderful.
Can I
Thank you.
also quickly add something here? I'm just remembering
Definitely, definitely.
when I was studying my master's, and that was in New Jersey, long time ago. Uh, One of my professors, her name was Rachel Haddis, a very renowned American poet. And it was a poetry writing class, and I was really bad at it. But one of the things that she said, it stuck to me forever. And she said, yes, writing means training, rewriting, revision, constantly drafting. That will hone your skills. But also, she said, read in order to write better. So, plentiful sources of reading, different kinds of works of reading, it definitely helps. So reading and writing both are necessary in order to for us to write better too.
Thank you so very much, Nidhi. Actually, I think your answer actually gives the answer of the question that I asked here, and this is from. I'm sure that this the same question hits upon the mind of our I mean, young uh, would be graduates or something like that. However, this time I have a question to you that you perhaps or you teach novels in the classroom. Do you?
I I started my career as a lecturer, where I said in New Jersey I started teaching lots of composition, writing. I taught courses in literature, not necessarily. And then obviously now I'm teaching lots of South Asian literatures, but I also teach film. I also teach cultural productions like photography and my work on Kashmir, and we can talk about that later. So, I would say I'm a literary critic and a cultural critic. So, it has become a more interdisciplinary field of teaching and research.
Okay. Then the question is uh, how, actually how do you teach writing composition? I mean, what are the challenges of teaching writing composition? If you just share a few words about that, then I think it will be better for our students or something.
Um, So I began my career as a lecturer of English, where I used to teach the required courses in composition that I mentioned, these writing courses. And I don't do that anymore because I'm teaching South Asian literatures and film and upper level courses right now in my current job. But that training really, I would say, paved the way for me to be a better teacher, I hope, in
I
my
see.
current space. And that is because it taught me about my writing, it taught me about what to look out for in students. And I think for teaching composition, couple of two most important things that I remind myself is um, to time and again tell students what the main point is, because it's very easy to say write a good thesis, have an argument in the paper, but to explain what that means. There is a fact and then there is an argument, and how to deal with something debatable in nature that should be an argument about a literary text or a non-fictional essay or something about the popular culture that they're writing on. So my writing courses that I used to teach were not just on literature. They would be on popular culture. They could be on advertising. They could be on a non-fictional essay that we were reading. So lots of various different kinds of genre. But again, how to focus on having a main point that connects the entire essay. And then, because we would be using research material, what scholars said, at least two or three, so that they get a practice of how to use research, which is so very important because, one doesn't know how to use research. I would see one of the biggest challenges is that their own voice would be completely erased or getting submerged within what X, Y, and Z said. So, how to find a balance in using the research to make a point, but not to lose one's own voice, making that argument. So, research user finding one's voice in the field and making a point about a larger theme or a topic, connecting both. Those were really challenging issues. But I wouldn't say that it cannot be achieved. It definitely can be achieved. One of the things I definitely did, it didn't help me a lot in those days, is have assignment I used to break down the assignment. We would begin with just the argument. Let's write the introduction and the argument. And then we would have, let's do the second part of the assignment, which is let's see what these three sources said and what do you feel about it? Do you agree with them? Not just lift chunks of it and just use it, but think about what you feel about it. Did you agree? Did you disagree? Why? And answering those questions in the second part. And then finally, in the third part of the assignment, we would put everything together. There's this wonderful book I used to use at the top of my head. The name is They Say, I Say. If you can get hold of that book, it really teaches how to have good argumentative research writing at the composition and the research essay level.
Thank you. Thank you. I think very good answer. I mean, you explained the answer very nicely. Okay, this time I have a question to you. That is post-colonialism, which is I think definitely your preferred area. You liked it most in terms of research or something like that, or writing books or reviews or many other things. So here I have a question that is we are familiar with the name Edward Said, uh, and we believe, or we can say in such a way that his two books, Orientalism and Culture and Imperialism, these two actually uh, change the way to critique texts, or change the way of critiquing texts, or the or something like that. So can you please share how would you assess the contribution of Edward Said in terms of paving the way for post-colonial criticism through his two great books, Orientalism and Culture and Imperialism?
That is a big question, and I'm hoping I can do justice in a short and a brief way. But we can go on for the next, I don't know, maybe the whole episode about this. I'll try to be brief. But this is such a great question. I mean, thinking back, Edward Said's contribution for us, those who do humanities and literary criticism or cultural criticism, is unparalleled. It's huge, right? And perhaps we can say that he literally consolidated or emerged the field of post-colonial studies as we know it in the humanities with the iconic Orientalism in 1978, and then, of course, culture and imperialism that you mentioned. So for me, as a literary slash cultural critic slash scholar, I think his contribution is, the critiques of empire and colonialism um, became a center of how we read literature or cultural texts. I mean, he literally paved the way for that, right? And um, I'm thinking that, when I look back as a grad student and then a doctoral candidate and so on and so forth, in the journey, Said's contribution is indelibly there constantly. He reminds us that literature, cultural productions, um, they're not detached from the power dynamics of colonialism or empire, and they're kind of deeply intertwined in how we read and think. So in a way, it changes how we look at history, how we look at how this works in a certain kind of way. His representation of politics, and representation is at the key and at the heart of the discourse that he has contributed in this massive way. And of course, his work has culminated into thinking about debating and critiquing in how Orientalism just became a justification for colonialism, and whether it's ideological, and what happens to the material and the political. So that debate is necessary, but this is a massive um, change in how we understand literary studies since the early 80s into 90s. But I'm also going to say that Said is important, not just because of those two texts, which are really extremely important. I mean,
Definitely.
literally, as we mentioned, you mentioned it too, it triggered a certain kind of change in post-colonial, emerged post-colonial studies. But I'm thinking of his work, posthumous work, Humanism and Democratic Criticism, where he focuses on the role of the public intellectual, the activist scholar. And he reminds us of the efforts of the scholar, of the teacher. Um, and, in this moment that we are in, so very important to remember that with the kind of unfolding genocide last 7 months that we're seeing in front of our eyes, or maybe in our cell phones constantly. So the role of the teacher, the role of the public intellectual, what you are doing, creating these spaces of discussion and dialogue. I think Said also is extremely important in ushering that, right? So, we have to think about Said in a larger way than just, I think, um,
Right.
that kind of beginning of post-colonial in the humanities.
Yeah, I am actually raising this question in the sense that I was in a training session and I got a resource person there, and he told me categorically, or he told us categorically in that training session that his way of thinking, his way of critiquing got changed when he read the book Orientalism and Cultural Imperialism, and he mentioned the name of the I mean uh, Joseph Conrad's book, A Heart
Mm,
of Darkness. You see that is also a very seminal book, and he told us that previously his teachers or his educators taught that book. I mean Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. So they just got the normal or traditional way of criticism, but and he actually criticized his own teacher in the way he expressed that before the publication of Orientalism or cultural imperialism, the way his educator or his teacher taught Heart of Darkness, I mean, when he got the book Orientalism, his way of critiquing completely changed. He tried to look from a new dimension.
mm,
To look at the text. But before that, before the publication of that particular or of these two books, even he or his educators didn't think in such a way. In that
yes,
sense, I see that these two books are very, very important, and that's why
absolutely.
I actually, I mean, asked the question to you.
No, you're absolutely right. And I, don't mean to lessen the impact of what Said has done in terms of cultural criticism, in terms of understanding representation, or the kind of epistemic violence that you're talking about, and really rethinking some of these writers, from the Eurocentric canon. Um, and not just from that canon, I'm also thinking when I teach, I teach literary theory also at the present moment, and those are that's a specific kind of a required class where majoring in English students have to take that class to go through all the kinds of different interpretations and theoretical readings one can do in literature. And in the post-colonial model module, I always begin with Orientalism, and then we have other texts, theoretical texts. But in the Orientalism model, I like to bring in examples from popular culture constantly, and then I bring in Disney. And what you're saying, we can rethink Conrad from the sort of normative readings. I played Aladdin, and there was this controversy about a certain song, and very very sort of prejudiced lyrics in that particular song in Disney, which was changed after the controversy hit.
I see.
Um, but we looked at the lyrics, and we looked at how Orientalism can be applied to Disney. We looked at also this particular song by Taylor Swift, and my students from the dominant spaces, everybody loves Taylor
Right,
Swift, right?
right, right.
Um, Maybe. But we looked at this particular song by Taylor Swift, Wildest Dreams, where there are these vast spaces of Africa with animals running around. I mean, literally, it's shown as Africa where there is not a single people, not a single person, no human subject. So, what happens in the current cultural productions is not devoid of the logic of colonialism, and that's where Said is so important to still read Orientalism and apply to everything around us. And that's where you're absolutely right. I mean, it's extremely important for people who are doing post-colonial criticism to have that training.
Thank you so very much, Didi. You explained wonderfully. I think students and event teachers, they will keep these ideas in their mind for so very long time. However, this time again, I have a question to you, and that is regarding post-colonialism or post-colonial critics. And we also know about Franz Fanon, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, and Homike Bhabha. So these three are also the great figures. So yes, you already mentioned that if you talk about them or talk about the pioneers of post-colonial or the torchbearers of post-colonialism, so it will take a lot of time. So it is not possible for a single sitting to finish about their contribution or something like that. But actually, I have got the opportunity. Students have got the opportunity, even teachers have got the opportunity through this uh, through this particular platform to listen to you. So if you share a few words about them, then it will be great for them. About Franz Fanon and Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, and also Homike Bhabha. And two of the people, Homike Bhabha and Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, these two are from Indian soil, South Asia. That's why we want to learn about them from you in particular. Please, if you say a few words about them.
That's a tough one also. Fanon, Spivak, Bhabha. Um, so that's a big question. So I'm going to try and assimilate. But you said something very interesting that, how do we see, you said their contribution, or, some words about them, and that two of these three mega stars and,
Yes, yes,
revolutionary thinkers are,
yes.
are from the subcontinent. But uh, let's think through this important question in terms beyond the geographical location of thinkers, and let's look at it, I would say,
Okay, okay,
in the different waves of post-colonial thought.
okay,
And
okay.
that's very important for me to, look beyond the borders and boundaries.
Yeah, okay,
um,
fine, fine.
and I think that the first wave of post-colonial thought, as we know, emerged is in this kind of anti-colonial thought and anti-colonialism. And that's where Fanon becomes so very important, along with thinkers like Amy Césaire and Du Bois and Amilcar Cabral. So, I mean, I would place that as this kind of first emergence of anti-colonialism within the wave of post-colonial thought. And in that specific moment, Fanon's work is absolutely incredibly important in locating that anti-colonial slash decolonial framework, questioning anti-black racism, anti-blackness, the logic of colonialism that he's really interrogating. But and I use Fanon's words, the psychology of the oppression, and how he's intertwining the political and the psychology together in his work, in questioning the effects of colonialism on the human, on the colonized psyche and the psychology of the colonized subject. So, I mean, in a way, that's really, really important. Um, so when I think of Fanon, I'm also thinking that it's very important to see Fanon's psychological bent in questioning this kind of oppression, but also that he suggests that the European selfhood is based in developing this kind of the other, right? So the self and the other, the encounter is very important when we think about Fanon's work and how that is embedded. So in that, it's the questioning of the Eurocentric values that begins with his anti-colonial thought in life's every sphere of experience, in lived experiences, and how to rewrite stories from the colonized, from the stories of the colonized, from writing their own histories and so on. So that's where Fanon becomes really, really important. And then you mentioned Spivak, Bhabha, of course, Said is there in, 80s, 90s, the early 80s and 90s, when literally the American academia is going through the second wave, I would say, where all of these scholars are so very important, including the subaltern studies from South Asia. But Bhabha is interesting um, in very incredibly important ways because he gives us certain other kinds of terminologies for Fanon and that kind of anti-colonial space where we are thinking about now the questions of hybridity, liminality, about mimicry. So those are different kinds of things. And he's, of course, extremely influenced by psychoanalytic and post-structuralist thinkers. But, he also, for me, he's breaking down that kind of binary, that kind of dialectical kind of thinking, civilized, uncivilized, or center and margin, and giving us this in between space. And that can be subversive, and of course there are critiques of that. But Bhabha is important because he gives us this possibility of that liminal space that can create something new, something different. And of course, we're at a time and space where pure identities and originary moments are suddenly becoming so important. So I think that liminality and in-betweenness becomes important even now to rethink originary ideas. So, we can think about Bhabha's importance there. And, especially hybridity, rethinking homogeneity in all kinds of ways. And then Spivak, of is this huge intervention with her iconic 1985 essay, Can the Subaltern Speak?
Yes.
Where she's literally intervening how the subaltern studies has not considered um, the gender question, women subaltern.
I see.
And I'm sorry, I'm giving a long drawn answer here because it's
No,
hard.
yes, yes. The question is actually question requires that. That's why you take. I
Thank
mean,
you. Um,
okay.
but for me, when I was given this task, I think a couple of years ago, it was during the pandemic. I was appearing for an interview, and I had to do a mock class teaching, and I'm sharing this experience and a story where they told me to teach BVAC as a mock class, and it was teach Can the Subaltern Speak to everybody, and it was a room filled with professors. So it was an incredibly hard task. How do you teach or mock teach Spivak suddenly within 40 or 30 minutes or whatever the time frame was? But for us in this space, I again want to reiterate how interventional just the essay is, Can the Subaltern Speak? Because it constitutes us to think about what is an act of speaking or speech, right? And who can speak, who is denied that speech, and how am I speaking, and who is authorizing my speech, right? On those kinds of questions are all embedded in one title of that essay, and of course the rest of the essay too. The conditions of speech that we absolutely must remember, whether it's in a space anywhere or within the classroom. The conditions of speech are very important. Um, and what do our acts of speaking have to do with power structures? So all of that is really an interventional kind of thinking that Spivak brings in. And Spivak's Can the Subaltern Speak also helps us identify to restore um systems, native cultures that were erased by colonialism, or how do we think of history or society from the point of view of the colonized instead of the colonizer? Um, and then finally, for me, Spivak is really important because we learn of how to move, how to erase that space of othering and how to move towards the other, right? And how, I mean, I think Spivak's interviews are so fascinating for me because I learn a lot more instead of the hard essays that we have to read and read and reread. Because I think in one of her interviews, she talks about um, we want to erase subalternity, so how do we erase the space of otherness to erase the space of subalternity ultimately? But more so in the recent, you mentioned one of the anthologies, and it was a co-edited anthology, the Refiguring Global Challenges. And we also, for me, it was important to look at a couple of other things that Spivak has done in the recent, and just this is really a nutshell, but her shift towards planetarity is very important. And I think in one of her works, Death of the Discipline, she talks about the global, how that word or has has become really a sort of this um, assimilating or creating a certain kind of sameness everywhere, that homogenizes under this large umbrella or arc of global capitalism. And she is shifting from the word global to planetarity. That I think is really important, because I think her notion of planetarity is to consider what it means to live on this planet beyond this idea of the global that sort of creates homogeneity and the sameness and the same systems everywhere, or wants to impose that kind of same system everywhere. So then thinking planetarity in her recent work is to reconfigure um, this kind of homogeneity, identities, and to reimagine. I think that other notion she's really focusing on is imagination, to reimagine different ways of coming together, being together, and which is why I'm so fascinated with what you have created in this space of We Want to Know. Uh,
Right.
want to know. I really like that. So I think to rethink our imaginations in a new way and to think through planetarity in our relations, human but also non-human, and to think beyond the structures that we are kind of imposed with constantly. And that's where Spivak becomes really important.
Yeah. So thank you so very much. Long answer, but I think
Sorry.
those who are focusing on these people and their ideas and criticism, I'm sure that they will get a lot of ideas from your discussion. No doubt about that. Okay. This time I have a question, and that is, mm, I just want to read a few lines from, if you just allow me, let me.
Please.
Yes. Uh, the subcontinent people, particularly those who are related to academia, they are very much aware of Lord Babington Macaulay, the man who actually demeaned our culture, our society, our resources, our knowledge, our academia, our writings, everything. Uh, and his defaming remark, I want to quote here, that I have never found one among them who could deny that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. And through this remark, we see that how much uh, the way he demeaned our culture, our academia, our knowledge, our tradition, our heritage. So, you know that there is always the debate of otherness. So, I mean, the Eastern and Western, this debate goes on still. So, so this attitude of demeaning another culture. So, this is not new. This actually, through this remark, we can come to know that it actually Lord Macaulay said in 1835 while talking about or while raising the question of
Minutes.
Indian education system. So that he said that time, and uh, to relate to this, I want to say I want to mention a very particular novel, particular writing, particular book written by E.M. Foster. So another, remark of that particular book here, uh, there is a quote I just want to say. Uh, he concluded, half kissing him, "You and I shall be friends. Why can't we be friends now?" And the other, holding him affectionately, "Is what I want. It's what you want." Thus stated by Dr. Aziz in the famous novel by E.M. Foster in A Passage to India. So here, uh, Aziz actually uh, wants to mention or wants to say that why is the barrier between the white and the people of India or of this part? Why is the barrier? What is the barrier? Why can't we be friends? So and two, to talk about this, I want to say that is the barrier still does the barrier still exist between the east and west, whether the white people, whether the western people demean, or is that a sort of attitude continue still? So as you are living in a country, I think you know that is the, I mean, supreme, I mean, white people are there. So what are your ideas? What are your ideas? Is the attitude changed from the attitude that actually the Lord Babington Macaulay held in that particular time, or the culture is changing and civilization is going to get changed? So what is your idea that whether the white people or the western people hold the same sort of attitude that the eastern people or the people of this area, and their culture, their education system, all are not parallel to theirs? So what is your idea? I'm not sure that whether I have made you understand the point of this question, or whether I have been able to relate to the two remarks, or something like that.
It's a very hard question, I have to admit. Um, so I'm going to start with do the barriers still exist? You mentioned, right?
Yes, yes, that is the
With
gist.
what Macaulay is talking about, I mean, that's like the peak of colonial mentality, right?
Yes, yes,
Um, and, one of the things that we do as post colonial scholars or critics or teachers is, think about not just what happened in the encounter of colonialism, but uh, what do we see in the legacies of colonialism around in, the 300, 500 span of years? And what do we see or what do we don't see because of the legacies of colonialism and what was erased, right? So do the barriers exist? I would say where there is the logic of colonialism and the colonial mentality, yes, they definitely exist. um, there are structures of colonialism around us, Eurocentrism, standards and values that are embedded within us, how to decolonize the mind. I mean, Gugi Watyongo's famous utterance. Um, so, yes, those barriers are still there until and unless there are ways to rethink these structures that so many of these thinkers that we've discussed today have offered us ways and tools with. But I would also think about, I'm really influenced by decolonial scholar and thinker Gurminder Bhamra's works. And in one of her recent works, Rethinking Modernity, she is talking about how the idea of modernity needs to be rethought, right? And what she's doing is questioning the standard ways of this kind of barrier, the East and the West, right? And showcasing how the modern world came into being in the kind of Eurocentric value system that we know of needs to be questioned, needs to be challenged, because it does not fully capture or kind of erases the historical processes of colonialism, for example. And in that book, she has given lots of examples, but one of the examples that she does give is the example of French industrial revolution, the French Revolution and the Industrial Revolution, and then she's saying that there's kind of no consideration at all of colonialism or the colonial context when we think about these processes or these events. So what she is trying to do in this particular work, or in many of her works, is transform the concepts that we have been laden with that create these barriers that you mentioned from Macaulay till now, and to rethink the categories of how we think through lived realities of modernity, of modernization, and bring back. And one of my favorite things that she has done in our recent times is, there's so much debate and critique about post-colonialism versus decolonial thinking. And in one of, I had a conversation with her. It was a published interview, and I asked her that, and what she was really she clarified it is that they're not opposing concepts, they're complementary in nature. And what post-colonial does is to sort of unsettle that history, that epistemic violence of colonialism that has done. And decolonial thinking or decolonial praxis puts back the once colonized subject in the center, celebrating the focus of decoloniality is the celebration of that subject that got erased. So they're complementary in that way. So, and we need both in a way to remake the worlds we inhabit. So yes, there may be spaces where those barriers are there, but it is for us to rethink and challenge these barriers of the East and the West, the clash of the civilizations, right? And then the next part of your question was Forster and Passage to India, which I thought was fascinating. It's an interesting text, as we both know, and whether or not there was a passage to India is up for debate. But and the lines that I think the last lines of the text were, the friendship is not possible. No, not here. No, not
Yes,
there.
yes, yes,
Something
yes,
like
yes,
that.
yes, yes, yes,
And you mentioned Dr. Aziz trying to have that friendship.
yes.
And I think, and I want to focus on that friendship because you mentioned that, right? And I
Yeah.
think to erase those barriers and all of these rethinking modernity and the structures of colonialism and the colonial bent around us so much, we also need to, for me especially, it is important to rethink radical friendships. And I do think I'm influenced by a wonderful thinker, Mike Ball, and I've used her works in many of my own writings. And she coins this phrase, critical intimacy. which is this subversive radical friendship. And her way of talking about this friendship is how can to again, going back to what you said, to erase those barriers that are hierarchical and hegemonic in nature. We need that kind of radical friendship, or a critical intimacy that doesn't make me want to learn about something else, or you about me or me about you, but from each other. And there's a big difference, right? And again, it takes away, it's a tough task, but I think it is possible through friendship, um, to learn from each other in the process, where friendship can create a space for boundaries to be erased, to transcend those boundaries, and for these possibilities that are subversive against these kind of very strictly laden boundaries and borders, um, to have a construction of ethical futures. And I think friendship can allow us these possibilities. And I do think it is highly possible.
Thank you. Very nice answer. I'm so much pleased with your answer, Didi. Very, very nicely said. Very nicely said, actually. Very nice. However, we are almost at the end of the session. Almost 1 hour has gone by already through our talking, through your answering and explanation. So this time, I have the last question to you, and that is definitely about. I mean, it's my pleasure that I raise the question about your book, which uh, got recently published. So your, I mean, latest book, and that is, I would like to know about your book. I mean, the title I just want to mention once again: uh, Kashmir's Necropolis, Literary, Cultural, and Visual Texts. You have been working about border and border issues and I mean South Asian context or something like that. So in that sense, what is this book about? If you just share a few words about this book, I think it would be better for us if we hear a few words about, from particularly from you about your own book,
Thank
please.
you. I will keep this short because I don't want this to be a long drawn answer again. But so my doctoral work was on partition studies, and I worked on literatures from the time of the partition, Manto, Kuratalin Haider, and also from the Western partition and also the Eastern partition with a translated text from Bangla. Um, uh, I recently got out of teaching a partition course also, that was from some of the works that I have worked with before in my doctoral dissertation, but also newer works. And that particular work on partition led me to get interested in Kashmir and what was happening since 1947 that created this kind of unique post-colonial space, whether it's post-colonial or not, even in a certain kind of neo-colonial bent. So I started looking at Kashmir from partition studies. But then it led me to unravel and unfold how this is not just particularly a partition moment. Of course, it gets um, really problematic with the uneasy accession and what happens in 1947 and later after the partition has aligned the borders. But I look at, in this book, in an interdisciplinary way, literature, in roughly in the last 20 years or so, visual texts that have emerged out of Kashmir, also on Kashmir. And I look at this conflictual space, which, and I'm arguing, is redefining a post-colonial conflict zone. And I'm asking through this whether or not there are taxonomical changes, the way that we understand some theoretical terms like post-colonial, like neocolonialism, that are not fully applicable when we look at this kind of space of Kashmir and the literatures that are representing Kashmir. So I'm making a layered argument in the book, and I am arguing that the literatures that I focus on reveal a certain kind of curious missing gap within our critical scholarship to investigate questions of violence, representations of violence within the texts, and we need to rethink the ways we understand this violence. And also, I look at different ways of understanding agency, survival, um, and gendered resistance in these works. So, and I'm specifically interested in this because Kashmir, and I don't know, I would love to know from you about Bangladesh, but in the Indian context, Kashmir is such a saturated space of representation with Bollywood. I'm sure you have seen plenty of
Yes.
these Bollywood films,
Yeah,
um,
definitely.
Kashmir Ki Kali and Mission Kashmir and all that, where this is so
Yes.
saturated in a certain kind of Bollywoodian fetish of what Kashmir is like, and a lot gets erased. And there's fantastic amount of work in critical Kashmir studies. These scholars who have created critical Kashmir studies, like Deepti Misri, Mona Bhan, Athar Zia, who have invested in how to rethink that kind of space of representation of Kashmir. So my book is reading literatures, film, photography, and looking at how we can read structures of violence, um, and what do we call these different modalities of violence, resistance, and survival in Kashmir. So I'm going to leave it at that.
So thank you so very much, Didi. It was wonderful time passed talking to you. So it was really, really great honor for me and privilege definitely to have you here for Want to Know Politely, সবিনয় জানতে চাই। সো আমি মনে করি আমি এটা বাংলা কথা দিয়ে শেষ করতে চাচ্ছি এখন, যে আমি মনে করি যে আপনাকে পাওয়ার মাধ্যমে এবং আপনার কাছ থেকে আপনার মুখ থেকে কথা শোনার মাধ্যমে যারা ইংরেজি সাহিত্যকে পড়ায় বা যারা ইংরেজি সাহিত্য পড়ছে বাংলাদেশ বা অন্যান্য অনেক দেশে, আহ, কিছু কিছু ক্রুশাল কোয়েশ্চেন যেগুলো আমি করেছিলাম, যেগুলো হয়তো আমাদের স্টুডেন্টদেরও তাদের মাথার মধ্যেও এই প্রশ্নগুলো ঘুরপাক খায়, বা যারা ইয়াং টিচিং প্রফেশনাল তাদের মধ্যেও এই কথাগুলো আসে, তারা অসংখ্য প্রশ্নের উত্তর খুঁজে পাবে, and definitely they will get the mental food to think about, to work anew about what they have got from your discussion, your explanation. And actually, I find no words to thank you. I find no words to express my gratitude to you, because you are extremely busy with writing, researching, and also teaching. I don't find any words to express my gratitude to you.
না না, এটা বলবেন না, আমিও বাংলাতেই বলছি।
আচ্ছা।
আমি এতদিন পরে এরকম ভাবে খোলাখুলি কথা বলতে পারলাম, আমার ভীষণই ভালো লেগেছে। আশা করছি স্টুডেন্টরা যারা শুনছেন বা শুনবে তাদের এটা কিছুভাবে হেল্প করবে। I'm always around if anybody wants to reach out to me. But especially যেটা আমি আগে বলেছিলাম, I think it is important, আপনি যেভাবে এটা গড়ে তুলেছেন, সবিনয় জানতে চাই, বা এটা আমি জানতে চাই সবিনয় কেন?
আচ্ছা, আচ্ছা। অভিনয় মানে আমরা তো আমরা তো মানে টিচারদের কাছে সবসময় বিনীতভাবেই প্রশ্ন করি। যদিও একটা ব্যাপার আমি এখনো সেইভাবে ওইদিকে যাচ্ছি না, যে কখনো কখনো হয়তো একটু কোয়েশ্চেন গুলা মোর চ্যালেঞ্জিং বা এরকম কিছু একটা হবে, যে হয়তো তার জন্য খুবই চ্যালেঞ্জিং, বা আমি বলছি না যে অকওয়ার্ড সিচুয়েশনে তাকে ফেলে দেবো বা এরকম কিছু, বাট তার জন্য প্রশ্নগুলা বলতে পারাটা বা উত্তরগুলো দেওয়াটা, মানে তার জন্য হয়তো এমন একটা সিচুয়েশন হবে, তাই আমি বলতে চাচ্ছি যে আমি যা কিছু জানতে চাই সেটা খুব বিনীত ভাবেই জানতে চাই, যেহেতু এডুকেটররা এখানে আসবে, এডুকেটরের কাছে আমরা খুব পোলাইটলি জানতে চাই। এই জন্যই আর কি
আমার
সবিনয়।
খুব এটা নিয়ে খুবই আমি ভেবেছিলাম কালকেও যে সবিনয় কেন? তো আপনার এটা বলাতে আমি বুঝতে পারছি আপনি কিভাবে এটাতে অ্যাপ্রোচ করছেন। কিন্তু আমার অসম্ভব ভালো লেগেছে যে এই প্ল্যাটফর্মটা আপনি গড়ে তুলেছেন। অ্যান্ড আশা করছি আ ভবিষ্যতে আরো কাজ আমরা করতে পারবো।
খুবই ভালো লাগলো দিদি, খুবই ভালো লাগলো আপনার যে এই যে আমাকে যে উৎসাহ দিলেন, মানে এটা আমি আপনার কাছ থেকে এই উৎসাহ পেয়ে আমি অনেক ধন্য মনে করছি, আমি ধন্য ফিল করছি আসলে নিজের কাছে।
অনেক, অনেক ধন্যবাদ আপনাকে এবং আপনার এই প্ল্যাটফর্মকে এবং যারা শুনছেন তাদেরকেও। এত লেটে স্যাটারডেতে।
জি জি দিদি। তো ঠিক আছে দিদি, তাহলে আজ আমরা যদি আবার কোনোদিন কোনো একটা পার্টিকুলার টপিক নিয়ে একেবারে স্পেসিফিক কোনো টপিক নিয়ে যদি আপনার সুযোগ হয়, আপনি যদি সময় করে
নিশ্চয়ই,
করতে পারেন,
নিশ্চয়ই।
তাহলে আমি প্রত্যাশা করব আপনি আবার মানে
We
এই
should
ছোট
have a round
ভাইকে।
table of speakers, not just Q&A. সেটা খুব
ওকে,
ভালো হবে।
ওকে, সেটারও টার্গেট আছে, কিন্তু আগে আমাকে কিছু পিপলদেরকে রিচ করতে হবে, তাদেরকে বুঝাতে হবে যে না আমি কি করছি আর কি, তারপরে আমি সবাইকে
নিশ্চয়ই,
একত্রিত নিয়ে এসে মানে একটা প্ল্যাটফর্ম আবার আবার ওটা করতে চাই দিদি। মানে ওটার
নিশ্চয়ই,
জন্য একটু একটু সময় লাগবে। এই আর কি।
নিশ্চয়ই।
জি
অনেক, অনেক ধন্যবাদ আপনাকে।
ধন্যবাদ দিদি, থ্যাংক ইউ সো ভেরি মাচ। ওকে, বাই বাই।
Thank you. Bye.